It's California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Thanks for joining us. Our guest, Jeff Kellogg, member of the Long Beach Community College District. He's a trustee vice president now, right?
Yes, I am.
Terrific. I want to speak with you, sir, about community colleges. As you know, a report came out recently by the very well-respected Public Policy Institute of California, and it talked about the state of our community colleges, and it was not a pretty picture, sir.
No, it wasn't, but there was a very real picture about how the reduction of the amount of people that are actually utilizing community colleges, the reasons why there's been a drop, and that's because the funding level has diminished over the last really 5 years tremendously, and so they talk about that, but it's a very honest report.
But what the report also discusses is the fact that while it's good news for community colleges that Prop 30 passed, it by no means stems the bleeding. I mean, maybe we're not gushing blood, if I can use a disgusting metaphor, but it's still a problem. We're still bleeding.
But it's interesting because people in the past have talked to me about it. Prop 30 passed, which it did, thank goodness, but it never was going to solve our financial problems. It was a Band-Aid on our issues, and what they really try to focus in on in that report is, all right, we are seeing a tremendous reduction in number of students in the community college system, the largest system in the world. And for me, what I pulled out of that report and what was most interesting to me was how are we going to address the needs in the future?
Right.
How are we going to get there? And that's some of the things I really wanted to look at that report.
They lay out three scenarios. They lay out greater contributions from the state of California, however that may happen, either through taxes or just changing the budget formulas. Parcel taxes, that's a possibility, and increasing student fees.
Right.
And so where do you land on these three possibilities?
Well, the student fees, which is interesting because we right now at Long Beach City College are dealing with a assembly bill trying to get where we can do courses on intersessions, those sessions between the traditional fall, winter, spring quarters.
And you would charge a greater amount.
$208 a unit versus $46, and it is coming under attack by people because they are saying immediately that it goes against the mission of community colleges in California, where it is accessible and it's inexpensive. And I always argue the point that $208 a unit, which is the same rate we charge our non-resident students, it is still a tremendous bargain, and it allows us to provide for students.
And arguably, if you can pay that $208 a unit and get the class out of the way, you won't have to stay an extra year, for example, and so that would be a net savings, no?
Well, absolutely, and not only just the net savings, but the students, they can continue their educational path without a disruption. The one point about the $208, I know a lot of people have said, well, what about people that can't afford to pay? There are provisions we're looking at that can address that issue, but also the students that can pay. Right now, the students that can pay are competing with the students that cannot pay. So if the ones that can pay the $208 for this one small intercession, this pilot program, that's just one small step on the overall issue of addressing students.
But here's another challenge I would think that you face. We know that per unit fees went from $26 to $36 to $46 in about an 18-month period prior to the passage of Prop 30. But even with that increase, the community colleges in California are the best bargain in the nation. They are the cheapest in the nation, the least expensive, I should say. So that begs the question, if we still are the least expensive in the nation, should we not be looking at increasing fees?
Well, I would agree with that. And the problem is, for many people, they still take the approach of what the mission of the community college system is. And that is, when I attended Long Beach City College decades ago, unfortunately now.
Many
decades ago, it was free.
Right.
But that was then. And the report and what we're looking at and what I try to do as a trustee at Long Beach City College is look at the future and how we are going to address the needs of the students for the future.
What about the notion of a parcel tax? We know, or some type of locally passed tax. We know that Governor Brown is floating the idea that the threshold be dropped for certain local taxes that would be put on ballots. It's a complicated formula, but
yeah, it is, and I can't. My approach is I can't base anything I'm doing at Long Beach City College or really any college in the community college system based on what's going to take place in Sacramento on the parcel tax, lowering the threshold, having a vote, having voters do it. The voters of Long Beach have been extremely kind to Long Beach City College. We
Have you had bonds recently?
We have bonds passed. We're doing the renovation of the building, and that's of many buildings at Pacific Coast campus and at the Carson campus. And that probably is part of my frustration is you go by there during the after the Christmas break or during summer, and you see these beautiful new buildings that are empty. You realize there's no faculty members in there that are instructing students. Students aren't having the opportunity, and that can be very frustrating. However we can do it, the funding mechanism in California still comes back down to they don't fund community college to the level they need to.
At the same time, Prop 30 did pass. So what I'm wondering is, are community colleges, such as Long Beach City, adding courses back that had been cut? Because we know since 2008, about 20% of sections were cut. So are we restoring those sections?
And the sad reality is no, we are not.
Really?
Actually, in Long Beach City College, we have actually discontinued programs.
I remember that happened.
Because we don't have the funding. And we went through a year-long process, and it was a very clean process, just sad results, but it was the best of a bad situation. But so the answer is no, because the Prop 30 passage was only for a year.
Now, I know that you work with other community colleges around the state. Are they restoring sections?
No.
It's not happening uniformly.
And the fact that I professionally, my real job is I work with community colleges throughout California. The company I'm with, my company, we work with also for privates, proprietary, whatever you want to call the private colleges. And that's what is interesting for me is I get to see how all sides work.
Of course.
And what is different from back when I attended community college, and also even just recently, you're seeing a lot of the community colleges need to look at what they're doing in the for-profits, privates, online education, things like that. And we need to learn and do that better.
Well, as you know, Senator Steinberg is actually floating a bill right now that would increase the use of online education and would allow college credit to be given. I'm not sure if it's for community colleges. It may just be for the 4 years.
It is the 50 core subjects that allow students to move forward. And those are the 50 courses he's proposing in his bill is really at the core, and it is community colleges as well.
And it would allow those online classes to be offered by the for-profits.
For-profits, that's right.
Which is quite revolutionary.
Well, it's a lot of terms. Revolutionary is one term that was used, other is not so complimentary. But what he's looking at is to try to give people options. And that's why my personal experience of watching what's taken place with the for-profits, I think they do things extremely well.
So there may be a place in your mind.
Absolutely, I do. Or we can learn from what they're doing and do the same things in the community college system.
I want to talk to you about the Long Beach Promise, because recently there was some very good news as it relates to the Long Beach Promise. The program is now 5 years old, and that's a program, just so our viewers understand, it's kind of a seamless transition from LBUSD to LBCC to CSULB.
That's right.
And so why don't you tell us some of that great news?
Well, it's just the fact that what you said, it's a seamless, a lot of people talk about it, we actually do it. It gives students the opportunity, and they're a credit to the Long Beach Unified School District, Cal State University, Long Beach. And we're in the middle, we're the connection between the two. And what essentially it does, it puts students in a situation for success that they know they can get to college. And what it requires, though, is for students to take certain courses, for the Long Beach Unified to offer certain courses, for Long Beach City College to give them spots to where they know they are going to maintain a certain level. And what we've found is that it has been a great success, and and again, a pilot program, I guess the best way to explain it, but it has been very successful.
And what's most promising in my mind is that, as we know, students of color have, for whatever reason, not had the same matriculation rates into 2 years and 4 years, and under the Long Beach Promise, every demographic is seeing improvements.
And what's interesting is the service area for Long Beach City College, which is, I want to say it's 130 square miles. It's just not Long Beach, it's Lakewood, Avalon, Lakewood. But our service area, our customers are potential students. They are students of color. That is what we are. And so to address those needs was the right thing to do. And we've done it, and we've done it in a very good way.
His name is Jeff Kellogg, member of the Long Beach Community College District. My name is Brad Pomerance. This is Charter California Edition.
Thanks.
Charter California edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. I'm glad you're here today. Our guest, Gary DeLong, member of the Long Beach City Council. And sir, it seems as if Long Beach, like many governmental entities, is doing better fiscally. The budget's looking better. The deficits aren't as significant, if at all. Am I accurate?
It's certainly better than it's been for the last couple of years, but there's enormous room for improvement. So
how? Where?
For
why?
example, the city is now projecting a surplus in FY14, so the next fiscal year, but on the other hand, we still don't allocate enough money for fixing streets, for repaving or repairing sidewalks, et cetera. So we're not fully funding our operations, yet we're projecting a surplus.
So how can that be adjusted? Because there is no doubt that throughout Southern California, infrastructure has been ignored.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially in the last 5 years. I mean, there was some stimulus dollars, and maybe with the economy turning around, it will get better. But still, I mean, Measure R, arguably, in LA County. But
and those things do help. Measure R. In
Right.
fact, today, the city counts 100% on Measure R for funding to repave residential streets. We budget zero out of the general fund. I think that's wrong.
So is there a move to change that formula? Because look, if there are surpluses, let it be. I mean,
Yes, but the but being it's a small surplus, right?
Okay.
Less than 1%, and also that in FY15 and FY16 we project deficits again.
But do you buy there's a surplus? I mean, for example, in the state of California, the governor argued in January that we were at surplus. But exactly.
Let's see what the May revise looks like.
Right. So, but
I don't
that's
think we're
my
surplus.
point. I mean, but forget California for a moment. What about Long Beach? I mean, are these rosy figures?
They're not rosy.
Okay.
All they are is that they're better than they were last year and the year before, but they're absolutely not rosy.
Why are they better? What's happened?
Well, candidly, in Long Beach, there's two things that happened. One is that when the state killed the redevelopment agencies,
Right.
we used to contribute about $1 every $6 would end up in a redevelopment agency.
Right.
When the governor and the state legislature killed that, $1 out of every $6 came back to the city. That's the number one reason we have a surplus.
Really?
That's good in the short term,
Right.
More money in the general fund. It's bad in the long term because now we don't have tens of millions of dollars of investments we can make it restoring our commercial corridors.
None of that money gets siphoned off, if I may use that term, to school districts or special districts.
Well, I mentioned out of every $6 we get $1 back. The other $5 do exactly what you're saying.
I see. What about the economy? Do you feel as if the economy has made a turn?
The economy, we believe, has made a turn for the better, but it's going to be a long, slow process back, and a lot of it's going to depend on our federal government. Can both parties get their act together, work together, solve problems? Then we'll do better.
Speaking of the federal government,
Yes.
we know that Washington continues to be a bit paralyzed as it relates to budgetary matters. I mean,
Yes.
from each day to the next, you never know. It seems like they're kissing each other, then they're spitting on each other.
There's
don't
more
know.
spitting than kissing, but go ahead.
That being said, we do know something called the sequester kicked in.
It did.
And what the sequester has done is it has mandated across the board cuts. There's no specific
Uneven.
Yes. Well, defense gets harder hit than other areas.
Correct.
So Long Beach, as an example, not as reliant on defense as it had been in the past, but still, I mean, there's a lot of impacts when you think about the defense industry for this general region. So how is Long Beach faring under the sequester, which admittedly has just kicked off?
My prognostication, right, nobody knows, but my crystal balls, it'll be a blip. I mean, there'll be a minor cut here and a minor cut there. We might have to change something. We used to do it this way. Now we have to do it that way. But if we have this conversation a year from now and you say, Gary, what was the impact? It'll be very minimal.
It's interesting. I recently spoke with Toni Atkins. She is the majority leader of the California State Assembly. She's a Democrat herself, and she represents...
There's nothing wrong with that.
Of course. She represents San Diego. Yes. Now, San Diego, much more reliant on the defense industry. I think she said 25% of jobs are somehow connected to the defense industry. She's very concerned about the sequester.
And as she should be in the short term, but in our capitalistic system, generally businesses adapt. So if they start losing a federal revenue stream, they figure out they need a private sector or an international revenue stream to make up for it.
For example, that it's all reliant on public dollars.
But those companies are in a lot of businesses. If you look at a defense company and what are their lines of businesses, they do more than just create product for the United States government. Boeing's a perfect example
Let's talk
of that.
about the ports then as an example.
Yes.
I mean, we know the ports are so vital to Long Beach, to Los Angeles, to California.
The economic impact is tremendous.
Tremendous. And we know it's economic. We also know that in terms of safety, keeping our borders secure,
You bet.
critical. You know, recently, as a result of the sequester, we heard that some smaller airports, their towers were being shut down. Are the ports being impacted in terms of those concerns?
But candidly, when you hear about small airport towers being shut down and house tours or tours of the White House being shut, those are the things to get people's attention. Just like in the city, if we say, well, if you cut our budget, we're going to take police officers off the street. You know, politicians and other people do that to try and get your attention. The reality is those things aren't going to happen. Those aren't the first things that you do.
But those air towers are coming down. I mean, it's not
Hawthorne
Long
was
Beach.
supposed to, and then they changed a couple weeks later and said, no, it's not shutting down. So I think you're going to see the FAA and others really backing away from that position.
What about the ports?
Well, you look at the ports, there's going to be an impact for sure. But on the other hand, I'll tell you the positive impact of container growth and commercial growth will vastly outweigh the potential negative in some federal funding formulas being changed.
And the good news is the twin ports are continuing to do extremely well.
They're healthy, they're well managed, they have excellent reputations internationally. They will continue to do well. Maybe they'll need to modify their business plan a little bit, but they will do well. Again, a year from now, when we have this conversation, there will not have been any significant impacts on the ports of Long Beach or Los Angeles.
I want to talk to you about Cal State Long Beach. We happen to be at Cal State today. Our bureau in Long Beach is at Cal State Long Beach. For the last 6 years, an individual named King Alexander served as the campus's president.
Yes.
He had been rumored to be a very strong contender to be the chancellor of the entire CSU system.
Correct.
It's hard to know what happened there.
Oh, I know exactly what happened there.
Okay, well, what I've heard is he wanted it and he didn't get it. I've also heard he was offered it and declined it.
It's not the former.
Okay, be that as it may, we don't, we'll keep that as it is. He has stepped down recently.
Or moved up.
Moved up. He will be going to the Louisiana State Institution.
Yes, running the entire system.
The entire system. Talk to us about that decision.
Well, first of all, it's a huge loss for the city of Long Beach and the region. I mean, not only has he done an outstanding job running Cal State Long Beach, but truly he has his fingers in so many different areas of the city of Long Beach. It's a tremendous loss for us. But candidly, as a friend and a neighbor of King's,
oh, is that true?
I wish him well. And he wasn't going to stay long. I mean, he is one of those individuals that you meet that say he is destined for greater things. So for me, I'm sorry to see him go, but it was only a matter of time before somebody said, I'm going to steal him from Long Beach.
Here's what's frustrating for so many. Because he is destined for greatness, as you described,
he is.
How is it that California couldn't keep him? I mean,
that is the issue, isn't it?
It is in so many ways because, as you suggested,
he would have loved to have stayed here.
Yeah, and it is California. And as you suggested, he may have turned down the Cal State Chancellor position. We don't exactly know. And the new Chancellor, Tim White from UCR, old friend of mine, phenomenal
nothing but good things. Yes.
Nothing but good things. But it really begs the question, is Mr. Alexander's departure a metaphor for what is happening in California today?
Well, let me just say this. First of all, under no circumstances am I suggesting that I'm going to speak for President Alexander.
Oh, no,
be clear with that. But if you're of that caliber of an educational professional, California is not the place to be.
Why?
Well,
this is California.
Look what the state legislature did to their budget for years. And they cut.
They had a choice?
But yes, they had numerous choices. They could have cut public pensions instead. But Prop 30
kind of did.
Prop 30, very little, not enough. But Prop 30 certainly restored some funding, in all fairness, but not anywhere near the funding they cut. It's a adversarial relationship currently between the UC system and the Cal State system and the governor's office, the state legislature. It's a mess today in California.
So
I'm
rendered speechless.
It's not a great place to be if you're the president or the chancellor of a university system.
How disappointing if that's the case.
That is the case. That is the case.
His name is Gary DeLong. He is a member of the Long Beach City Council. My name is Brad Pomerance. This is Charter California Edition. Welcome back to Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Stick around because we are going to learn so much about oil drilling, about fracking. We are speaking with Rick Behl. He's a professor at Cal State Long Beach. I am so glad you're here because fracking is a big issue in California. Lots of legislation percolating, if I can use that term, in Sacramento. Could you, for our viewers and for me, tell us exactly what fracking is and how it's different from conventional drilling, if that's the word?
Yeah. So fracking is a technique to get more oil and gas out of rocks that are not easily produced from. And it's a technique that's been around for a long time.
It's not new.
It's not new, but where it's being used and how it's changed and how it's being used is something that is new.
And in California, there's something called the Monterey Shale, and it's actually not in Monterey, it's down in Southern California.
Well,
it's getting a lot of attention.
Yeah. So it actually is up in Monterey. That's why it's got the name.
But it comes down?
But it comes all the way down to as far south as Orange County.
I see.
And it goes inland to east of Bakersfield, and it goes all the way up to Northern California. And in fact, it's related to a swath of really similar deposits around most of the Pacific Rim.
And what do we know about this Monterey Shale? Because apparently the excitement surrounding it is getting to a fevered pitch.
Yeah. Well, it's for a long time been the center of interest for the petroleum industry because it was the source of most of the oil in California. And that oil that it generated, most of it would work upwards into overlying sandstones, which is what they drilled into. And those are what we call the conventional reservoirs that we're asking about. So they're like porous sand, like on the beach that can, you could pour water through. And so you could drill into those and you could easily let the oil, if it had pressure and gas, flow into your well, or you could pump it if you needed to, and you could get the oil out. In certain places, San Joaquin Valley, Santa Maria area, the Monterey Formation itself, where it was very brittle and it was all broken up by tectonic forces and faults and stuff, was also produced from because it had the oil in those cracks and things like that. But much of the Monterey was not brittle enough to be naturally fractured by the earthquakes and such. And yet that still has a lot of the organic matter that with burial turns to oil. And what the geologists and the petroleum engineers and stuff have learned over the last 5, 6, 8 years is that these kinds of rocks that we never could get oil from before because they didn't have enough big pores or open to draw the oil from easily, if they were drilled into in a careful way and they were fractured, then we can get the oil out of these rocks that otherwise would be too tight.
And fractured means?
Okay, so hydraulic fracturing or fracking is an artificial technique that you use after you drill the well to enhance the ability of fluids and gas to get into the well. And so what you do is you take a portion of the well, you seal it off, and then you pump with these trucks with gigantic, powerful pumps. You pump water with some chemicals that help make the water more slippery, and sand into that area so much that it builds up the pressure and it fractures the rock on all around the well.
And that's where the oil comes from.
Yeah, so the rocks got oil in it. But these new fractures now connect all these pores and these little spaces and tiny holes that had the oil in them all together and into the well.
But the concern comes from the chemicals that you mentioned, or is the concern overstated in your mind?
Well, the concern is a real concern, okay? But the fear may be overstated because people just are not familiar and they don't know it. We use chemicals for all kinds of industrial purposes, right? I mean, everything you do, working on cars, making plastics, doing everything uses chemicals, solvents. Some of them are really nasty, okay? Any place that's had a lot of industry, the San Francisco Bay, LA, has had leaks. People put, barrels of solvent somewhere and it corrodes and it leaks and it gets down in the groundwater. And a big part of what we geologists do is environmental cleanup.
Right, of course,
so
remediation.
We go down into those aquifers where water is that are kind of shallow and we're cleaning them up and such like that. Oil drilling is almost always to much deeper depths than the depths that the aquifers that hold our drinking water is. And
even the fracking version of oil drilling.
Oh yeah, absolutely. In most places it's way deeper, like 5,000,
Beyond,
10,000 feet, a mile, 2 miles.
So what you're saying then is that the chemicals that are used could never legitimately leak into the groundwater?
No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that it depends upon how careful
I see.
and safe and what kind of protocols, procedures you have to make sure you do things right. So this is what I am saying. I'm saying that if you are fracturing down in these deep rocks, that water with chemicals is not going to leak all the way up through thousands of feet into a water table that people drink from. But if people spill that stuff on the surface and it goes down, just like if I spilled my oil from changing my car's oil on the ground, that can seep
So
down.
is that where we need regulation? Because that's what's percolating in Sacramento is at this stage, we really don't have regulations in the state. We have some federal regulations, but what's the agency? Dogger?
The Department of Oil, Gas,
exactly.
and Geothermal
so,
Resources.
There's a lot of nervousness.
Well, yeah, I mean, so this has become an issue, all right? And it's become an issue because it's become to people's attention, and it's come to people's attention because it's become much more prevalent.
Right.
And it's occurring in areas that drilling activities and production activities had never been before. That's because there's been like a real paradigm shift. There's been a game-changing evolution in our understanding of what kind of rocks we can get oil and gas from. And people don't realize this yet, but this is changing everything. United States is producing more oil and gas than it has for like 20 years.
So could it be that we are heading towards oil independence?
Yes, probably.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. Where that was not even considered years ago. And the thing is, it's not because no one thought about it, no one worked on it before.
It's technology.
It's because of it's actually because of new concepts. It's the science that figured out that these are the kinds of rocks that actually have this oil and gas, and then the technology allowed us to get it out of them.
What's amazing is I was reading an article about you, and in it, the author indicated that the Monterey Shale could have up to 64% of the available oil that can be accessed through fracking. Whether that number is inflated, we don't know. But in the lower 48, there's clear evidence that we have a massive amount.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. There are a lot of questions about that need to be tested in different ways. But yeah, the idea is that all these areas that you hear about, Pennsylvania, New York, Ohio, Texas, North Dakotas, things like that, where there's been this great expansion of production of oil and gas from shale rock. Shale rocks means a really fine sediment that was originally
Monterey Shale.
That was originally mud and then got compacted and hardened. And all of those deposits, which are very prolific, are relatively thin, like 100 feet of zone that they're interested in, even less. The Monterey Formation is on average 2,000 feet thick, and in some places it's 8,000 feet thick. But it's more complicated than those other rocks. California always is, right?
Of course.
We're more complicated. We have a lot more variety, and there's a lot of stuff that needs to be worked out. And in those estimates, they're just saying how much rock is there.
I see.
So how much could there be? And what we got to find out is how much of that particular rock is actually the good stuff.
In the final analysis, though, while this is exciting, do we need to head towards some type of regulatory framework?
Oh, I think we have to.
Right.
Okay, I think we have to because this discovery that we can get oil and gas out of these other areas, these shales, means that drilling and production will be going areas that it had never been before, outside of the established oil fields. And so therefore you're having something that's a rather industrial process in agriculture and neighborhoods and stuff, and we've got to figure out how to make that coexist.
I am so glad you joined us. It's a fascinating discussion and one that we really need to get our handle on because, like you said, it's revolutionary.
Yeah, it really is.
His name is Rick Behl. He's a professor at Cal State Long Beach. My name is Brad Pomerance. This is Charter California Edition.